This is Eileen Griffin with the Heartland View from the Heartland Daily News, bringing you information and analysis about public policy stories that affect your life, your health, your freedom, and the nation's economy. This week, we're going to give you the bottom line of a bunch of different stories. There's so much happening in the public policy world, but there's a lot of related themes here. So there's a theme that's got a lot of little tentacles, and I'm going to try and bottom line this for you in one word, and that word is manipulation. So there's a couple of different stories on Heartland Daily News about this infrastructure bill. So the infrastructure bill is out there and it's been batted back and forth, and there's one bill and then there's another bill. But the bottom line is there's a lot of manipulation happening. There's a lot of manipulation of the American people as we're being told infrastructure, and so we're thinking roads and bridges, and that's not even remotely close to what is in that bill. And there's different, as things evolve, there's different percentages of what's actually infrastructure and what is not. But keep in mind that as we're being told, this is infrastructure, and so you've got a couple things happening. You've got other Congress people starting to get on board, even Republicans, because there's going to be an awful lot of money that's going to go to some organizations, and particularly organizations that do large projects, construction firms, for example. And so some of these Congress people, in order to get that, being able to go back to their constituents and bring that money, they're being manipulated to be in support of this bill and to whatever degree is actual infrastructure. And then you've got the people that are just looking at it and saying, well, it sounds good. I mean, we probably do need some new roads. Not understanding, as Richard Ebeling points out in one of the articles for Heartland Daily News, that we're actually rated as one of the best in the world in terms of roads, in terms of some of the infrastructure. So do we really even need all these roads and bridges? Is that just a manipulation? And it's hard to tell when you try to figure out what's really happening, and there's so much manipulation. So infrastructure, there's a lot of waste. There's already things that, to whatever degree we know. We have one story that reports, one reporter says there's actually a line item in there for fish restoration. Now, I don't know what that is, but it's in there. So as taxpayers, we're apparently going to be paying for fish restoration. We're also going to be paying for the ability to train a commission to talk about women as truck drivers. Well, I think we know we could be truck drivers. I'm not sure we need a commission to tell us that. And a little Google search in about 5 minutes would tell you about that job, that career, the pay rates, where you could even get training and go to school. So government commission. So a little bit of that concept that we're thinking, what's really in this bill and what are we paying for? Because we also don't get told taxpayers are paying for this. So they tend to make it sound like it's a gift. It's not a gift. We're going to be buying this stuff ourselves. So manipulation. What else is in the news this week that's manipulative? So we saw recently this release of information from the IRS, and it was a leak of some sort, data and tax returns on very wealthy people. Well, why would that be released right before we're going to launch all this massive spending? And since President Biden took office, that seems like all we talk about. It seems like that's all that he's brought forward since he's been in office is more ways to spend our money. And it's enormous amounts of money. These are just very large budget items and all these major projects. So why is it that as all of this is going on, and we know that has to adjust the taxpayer situation, we know taxpayers are going to have to foot the bill. So we're hearing, well, we're trying to be acclimated to this idea of higher taxes. What better way to do that than to show us some of the wealthiest Americans and how much money they have? So when the Biden administration says, well, we're going to raise taxes, but only on the wealthy, and we look at the tax return of a Jeff Bezos, for example, you can't help it. You kind of think to yourself, well, geez, he certainly has plenty to spare, so you don't feel so worried about them anymore. And that's the manipulation. So instead of sticking to the principle, what's the principle? Well, people earn their money. People have a right to spend it how they choose to spend it. And this manipulation of, well, it's our decision to tax the wealthy because we want all this huge infrastructure or whatever other pet projects that they have. One final story on manipulation. So there's a story by David Harsanyi on the website as well, heartlanddailynews.com. And this is about this continued discussion about the eviction moratorium, which is essentially a rent moratorium, right? We've talked about this before. It's been in a previous segment. Continues to be in the news. So President Biden continues to try to expand the moratorium and extend it. And we've had the squad Congress people out sleeping on the steps, doing the dramatization of the whole idea, and making this a big dramatic issue. And of course, the complicit mainstream media goes along with it. But what is this in reality? Well, this is a manipulation, of course, of our emotions, to feel sorry for people, to be sad, and to be thinking, we don't want to see people on the street if they don't choose to be on the street. But what's really happening? It's kind of insidious, really. So the manipulation, first of all, of private property owners. So if you have a building, you own a apartment complex, for example, and you're a private owner, you bought this building, you have renters, right? So there's a contract between the owner and the renter. The government is not party to that contract. And in a country where we have a constitution that allows private property, and while we're continuing to be allowed to have private property, remember the socialists do not want private property, but we do. So private property, you have an owner, you have a renter, they come to an agreement and they sign a contract in exchange for the money that exchanges hands for the rent. The owner allows you to live, it says you can live in my property. You can live in my apartment, you pay me the rent. It's a contract, it's an agreement. Now the government is going to come in and destroy that agreement. They're not even part of that contract, but yet they can come in and do this. So the manipulation is it's saying to private property owners, that isn't really your property. Because what ownership rights do you have if the government can come in and tell you that you can't collect rent on your own property? What else can they tell you to do? And by the way, they mandated even potentially jail time for an owner that doesn't comply. So very coercive. A landlord is told you could face jail time, but yet a tenant is told you can do whatever you want. Now, it's not good for the tenant either. Here's another manipulation. So a tenant, typically, you're used to paying rent. That's part of the deal. It's the agreement that you've made. Now, you've got someone telling you you shouldn't have to pay rent. So what are you doing to these people? You're telling them it's now an entitlement. Now you've entitled them to free rent. So how much harder is it going to be to convince people to pay rent? And how much more difficult is it going to be to encourage self-responsibility when the government is interfering and saying, you don't have to pay rent? Now, again, we understand there are certain hardships and situations, and not to negate that. But in terms of a totality, in terms of the United States president deciding that he's going to manipulate people to do what he wants, regardless of the Constitution and regardless of what is in the best interest of either party, either the landlord, the owner of the property, or the renter, who now is told that they have this new entitlement. So, manipulation. There's a lot of details on each of these stories. I just wanted to bottom line and keep it short for you, but feel free to read all the details on heartlanddailynews.com. And as always, if you'd like to know more information about what the Heartland Institute is doing, please go to the website heartland.org. Otherwise, I hope you have a great week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your week. We're getting close to the end of summer. Enjoy it.